Here's our general Green Amendments training. And today we're basically just going to start with context. So why are we giving this training? Why does it matter? We're going to talk about the problems in New Jersey that we kind of briefed in that kind of intro presentation we have and go more into specific examples. Going to go into what the Green Amendment is, including, again, looking at examples, specific pieces of the language that make it a Green Amendment, as well as examples of what is not a Green Amendment. What does a Green Amendment do? So we're going to look at a case study to see how the Green Amendment in real history can actually be used. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what it means for New Jersey, so how we could use it here if we have it.
Okay, so we're starting with the context. So why are we even having this training? So as you guys hopefully know, we're campaigning for a Green Amendment in November, pass it 60% majority in both houses. So right now we're focusing on lobbying because that's the most direct way that we can approach our legislators who have the power to say yes or no to the Green Amendment. And then we're also raising awareness because obviously it's really important to raise awareness to grow the movement, and also so that when we get to the second part of our campaign, the ballot campaign, that we have a better time of passing it with a 50% majority to get it actually into the Constitution. And we're having this training because we need everyone to be able to talk to policymakers about the Green Amendment, both municipal and state, talk to people in their communities about the Green Amendment effectively, and then also answer any questions they get, because there's a wide range of possibilities that could happen. We want everyone to be confident in their knowledge so that we have the best campaign possible. Okay, so we always start with the problems that we're addressing. So what do you all think the problems are? Why exactly do we even need a Green Amendment? Anyone can unmute and answer. Just two of you.
Spitball anything.
Environmental justice / injustice.
Mm-hmm. That's a big thing that the Green Amendment can address. Anything else? It can be anything.
I'll just add that we're obviously shifting to a different climate, which should not be happening.
Yep, climate change. Come on, you guys know this. You are leadership at NJSSC. This is like your thing.
Plastic pollution? I don't know if it would really cover that, but I know that's a big environmental issue, and we could potentially use the Green Amendment to address.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right now, don't think about it as in specific Green Amendment things. Just spitball any problem in New Jersey. So any
environmental problem that you see. Yeah. Anything. It doesn't have to be like related to the Green Amendment at all.
We have a lot of big factories, and also we're like a major transportation hub, which ends up we have a lot of carbon emissions in our state.
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Yeah, the transportation sector is like a huge emitter of carbon dioxide here, a lot higher than the national average. It's a big issue.
Okay, well,
you guys got a lot of them.
Yeah, those are pretty much the big points.
All right, so we're kind of going to split up these problems into two different levels. First are surface level problems. So the surface level problems are physical problems that we see that are harming communities, that are examples of larger problems or symptoms of way bigger issues. So all of these that we are going to list here are examples of surface level problems, physical problems. So contaminated water, polluted air, soil and street pollution, toxic sites, lack of green space. And some of these may not seem like they would just be surface level. They may seem like they're the root problems, which are second level. But if you think about a lot of these, they are just the physical problems that we see in our communities. They're not the underlying causes. So if you think about contaminated water and polluted air, the underlying issue there is pollution management instead of pollution prevention. And the lack of green space and habitat loss kind of goes with the gaps in our legal system, the lack of accountability and protections for the people. And then for climate change, while it's a little bit of a mixture of both in our context, it is mostly surface level because other deeper, more systemic problems are behind it, including lack of cooperation and accountability between companies and governments. So we're going to go over 2 different examples today and then loop back to this at the end to see how the Green Amendment can actually help us here in our state. So first we need to give some context about these issues. And there's obviously a lot more, these are just some examples. So we're going to start with the Newark lead crisis. Newark is in northern New Jersey, Essex County near New York City. It's the largest city in our state, and it is a huge environmental justice community. It's mostly low income and mostly people of color. So the city has recorded elevated lead levels in drinking water since 2015, and this community is still struggling. This situation is a lot like Flint, Michigan. Lead was detected in public and private buildings around Newark. Old pipes and infrastructure are still lined with lead, and it got into the drinking water. And lead is very, very poisonous to people, and it has a cumulative effect on the body. There is no safe level. And is most dangerous for pregnant women and young children, as it affects the developing nervous system. And these communities have been dealing with this issue for almost 6 years now. Nothing has really changed too much. So the residents have been depending on bottled water distributed by the city and organizations like the Newark Water Coalition. So the local government has tried to help and claims a lot of progress has been achieved, but many still depend on the Newark Water Coalition for free weekly water pickups. Free weekly water pickups, seriously. So city officials have given out nearly 70,000 bottles of water. Other public entities like the Newark Museum of Art have been also distributing some water to the community. And some of these sources have also been interrupted or made more difficult to work due to COVID-19, which is also disproportionately occurring in these communities. So residents' water pipes are still being replaced after about 6 years. The city has given out lead filters and has been working on replacing the pipes, but while the majority of the pipes have been replaced by this point, they are still not finished. The problem is not over. The Newark Water Coalition makes sure to keep educating people, even as the city says it is all under control. And this is just one of the many environmental issues that the environmental justice community of Newark faces on a day-to-day basis. Newark is a well-known environmental justice community for the many, many inequities it faces, including, but definitely not limited to, polluted water, air pollution, lack of green space, heavy industry, and this is all concentrated in an area where residents are mostly low income and minority. Okay, so the second level of these problems that we're going to talk about today are root problems. So these are the systemic problems behind the surface level problems. For us, this mainly focuses on our system of laws. So these surface level problems are the symptoms of these bigger issues, and these issues are harder to see and therefore also harder to fix. So here are a few examples of root problems. Number 1, focusing on managing pollution, not preventing it. So for pollution management allows for a degree of degradation to occur. And it accepts pollution as a fact of life, when really it doesn't have to be and really should not be. Secondly, there are many gaps in the legal system and the laws. The laws are currently not all-encompassing, and full implementation of them is still devastating. Communities also have no legal leverage to protect themselves. The legal system is clearly just not a good enough tool as it is. Communities facing surface level problems cannot protect themselves in court or in local government. Environmental rights often lose out to economic concerns and low budgets. And polluters are really just not held accountable. Polluters can be individuals, corporations, the government. these laws, this legal system with the above features is just not good enough. Thus, degradation is able to continue. This is our example of a root problem. We're going to go back to Newark, as it is a big city with many environmental justice issues. So the Covitana incinerator, many may have heard of this. It's in the Ironbound community in Newark. It's a big environmental justice community. It's the home of the Ironbound Community Corporation and provides services to families and develops a sustainable and tolerant community. Also, this whole issue was profiled in the film, The Sacrifice Zone, which if you haven't looked into yet, really, really good. I would definitely recommend. So Newark's Ironbound district has the largest waste incinerator on the entire East Coast. This is owned by the Covitana Holding Corporation, which specializes in industrial waste management and waste to energy services. And this burns waste from 22 New Jersey and New York municipalities to make electricity. And this is often pitched as a sustainable solution, a landfill alternative. However, it is really a huge emitter of particulate matter and nitrogen oxides, drastically hurting the residents' health. Ironbound residents suffer from high rates of asthma, respiratory diseases, and other ill effects, including higher COVID rates. And this is just one of the many polluters in the Ironbound's air. So the plant claims that it is environmentally friendly for turning waste into energy, and the current system allows for this. Oh, thank you, Ava. Oh, Covitana. Thank you, Ava. Yes, so they claim that they're environmentally friendly, and the current system allows for this. And the Ironbound is a sacrifice zone, meaning the pollution in the Ironbound is let slide because it helps other communities, especially whiter, more affluent communities surrounding it, and discards of waste and they get energy, so it's allowed to continue. And this is a very direct instant of these roots problems because it allows for degradation, and these communities have no legal leverage for their defense. So the current system of laws is clearly fundamentally failing. Think about the Newark lead crisis, the Covitana incinerator. So human rights are not equated with their legal rights. So human rights are those universal rights that all people have, despite their nationality. It's universal. These are really basic. These include these basic environmental rights currently. However, the legal rights are in our system of laws. They're written down. They're in our Constitution. They're in our system of laws. These human rights are not being equated with our legal rights, and that's why degradation and these communities are allowed to be sacrificed.
Yeah, so our solution to this, our addressal of these root problems that are causing so many of these surface level problems in New Jersey communities is the Green Amendment. And obviously, since we're campaigning for this, we want everyone to have a pretty deep and substantial understanding about the Green Amendment, what it is, how it works, so that obviously you know what you are campaigning for. So some of you, I'm not sure if you have seen this video before. I'm gonna play it again. I don't know if it will let me go for
What is the Green Amendment? Simply, it is protection for all of our communities, an acknowledgement of the basic things we need to survive: clean air, clean water, a stable climate, and a healthy environment. Neighborhoods across New Jersey are struggling to breathe, suffocated by the toxins emitted into our air. Shouldn't our children be endowed with the right to the clean water they need to survive? The Green Amendment safeguards this and is placed into the most sacred document in our legal system, the Constitution, into the Bill of Rights section, where it is seated along with freedom of speech and the right to bear arms. After a global pandemic, we ought to know how important our health is. The Green Amendment will protect all people's health and well-being. Finally, acknowledging our basic rights needed for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Go to Green Amendments for the Generations to help us pass this amendment here in New Jersey. What is the Green Amendment?
As that video pretty much explains, the Green Amendment is a constitutional amendment added to the New Jersey Bill of Rights that would protect the rights to basically our environmental rights. And these are the basic things that we need to survive. And we all pretty much accept them as a given of existence. You know, you need to breathe oxygen, you need to drink water. And they're pretty much rights that we often take for granted. So what is the goal of the Green Amendment? If these are things that are so basic, we take them for granted, why are we bothering to acknowledge them in our Constitution? Why do we need to write down in our system of laws that humans need to drink water to survive? One would think it would just be something that we consider anyway. Well, A, we want to advance better government decision-making. It's government officials' jobs to follow the Constitution, not necessarily common sense. So when we put environmental rights into the Constitution, that means all government decisions need to come from that place of consideration. Decisions must be made with environmental rights in account. 2, we want to support government actions, community, and business interests that are beneficial for environmental protection. Basically, we want such actions to be considered on equal footing with other types of considerations. Right now, our other Bill of Rights such as, say, property rights or liberty, and a lot of times as well, economic concerns are often considered first priority for governments. So by putting environmental rights in the Bill of Rights, we're making sure that they're not playing second fiddle to these other considerations anymore, and they all get equal consideration in decision making. And it encourages them as they're now constitutionally supported. And then third, what a worry, but basically we want to help impacted parties seek court intervention when the government infringes on their basic environmental rights. Basically, what this boils down to is we want the Green Amendment as a tool in court cases. In court, you can't cite basic common sense necessarily. Everything in court is based on the law and is based on the Constitution. So by putting this into our Bill of Rights, it solves that problem that Margaret mentioned, that communities don't have the legal tools they need to protect themselves by giving them what they need. So here's Pennsylvania's Green Amendment. It's an older amendment. It was passed in 1971, and it was very popular in its time. It was the most popular provision on the ballot that year. I think it passed with a 4-1 margin. And while for many years it was not very effective, it was regarded simply as policy, which shows that the Green Amendment is not a catch-all solution. It needs to be actively used. It was later revived, and we'll talk about that. Actually, we won't talk about that in this presentation, actually. But basically, in 2012, it was revived by the Delaware Riverkeeper and Maya van Rossum, so it has come to be a much more powerful piece of law than it once was. The New Jersey Green Amendment, as you can see here, is pretty different, and it's considered a modern Green Amendment because of the changes and the things that were added to make it more specific and more powerful by the modern Green Amendments movement, led by now Green Amendments for the Generations. So it's still very short and nice. It has broad language fitting of a constitutional amendment, but there's still a lot of important language packed in, and I'm pretty sure many of you have seen our other presentation here where we go into this language, so I won't talk too much about the specific language, but it is still very important. So of course, we have every person and benefit of all people. This makes sacrifice zones and environmental injustices unconstitutional. You can't make the decision anymore to decide to do something that benefits one group of people at the cost of somebody else. All of your decisions need to have equal benefit for everybody. Action or inaction, we know both are just as dangerous when it comes to environmental issues. However, right now, it's much easier to hold the government accountable for actions that you can point to. So the Green Amendment recognizes that both are harmful and both need to be considered equally for their ramifications in legal considerations. So it just adds this part to the law. Common property or a trustee. This redefines the relationship between the people and the government. It creates an entirely new dynamic in which the government is now the trustee The people are beneficiaries, and the assets are now the environments and the public natural resources. Basically, these are taking older legal terms that have a lot of precedent and have already been used for a lot of personal relationships and applying it to the government, the people, and the environment. So a trust and a trustee, a trust is a collection of assets that's entrusted, hence the word trust, to someone, the trustee, for the benefit of others, the beneficiaries. It's the trustee's duty to ensure that the beneficiaries receive the most benefits possible from all the assets in both the short and the long term. And trustees must act with prudence, meaning they must be cautious. They need to consult scientific data before making their decisions. They can't stay uninformed. They have to do the best to inform themselves. They have to be loyal. And that means acting only in the best interests of the beneficiaries. So that means government actors can't make decisions for their own benefit. They can't make decisions in the interest of lobbyists or other special interest groups. It has to be for the beneficiaries as a whole. And they need to be impartial. And that has a very similar effect as that every person benefit of all people language. They can't make decisions that are biased towards some group of people. So biased towards certain communities that they may deem more important, such as whiter or more affluent communities, as is the trend now. So these things apply because you're bringing over all of these established legal guidelines that are much older than the Green Amendment and much older than the idea of putting environmental rights in the Constitution. And this puts limited authority on the trustee to protect beneficiaries, which is us, and to make sure they abide by the trust terms, and it gives a lot of context to the Green Amendment. So it's not a new thing. Once you have this trust language in there, the legal system and the courts, they know how to treat this because they've done it before. They've just done it on a smaller scale with individuals acting as trustees. By putting this in the Constitution, it makes this relationship the constitutional duty of every single government actor, meaning it doesn't rest in a single part of the government or a single branch. It commands all branches and all levels of the government. Every government employee, every elected official, they are all trustees. And all of these limits on trustees and all of these things that they're obligated to do as trustees, that applies to everybody. This does a few things, which we won't go into now, but it prevents easily diverting funds that have been dedicated to environmental issues and environmental protection to other usages. That's a big problem right now because a lot of times if other funds are drained, environmental protection is deemed less important, so they take that away, but they're not allowed to do that if you have this trust relationship. And then it also demands that the government is proactive on equitable access to a healthy environment because they need to make sure all of their beneficiaries are benefiting from what is essentially owned by the beneficiaries, the assets, the environment. And it means they have to be proactive on degradation because if they let degradation and pollution happen, then they're not fulfilling their duty to make sure us beneficiaries take the most possible benefit from the environment. So it's not just, they don't just have to protect the environment to make sure we're not hurt. They need to do the best that they possibly can. So it's no longer the bare minimum type of relationship. So in summary, this trust language really is what makes the environmental rights in the Green Amendment real. And of course, we have a lot of other pieces. Present and future generations forces the government to take future generations into account and to think in the long term, which is very important for environmental issues, which are mostly cumulative and take a long time to actually occur from start to finish. Self-executing allows the Green Amendment to stand on its own and make sure that it's not policy, which would mean it depends on the legislature passing bills, passing laws in order to actually enact it. That's not necessary with a self-executing Green Amendment. And then, of course, rights. And the word right and its placement in the Bill of Rights is what solves that problem that human rights are not legal rights. It makes our human rights legal rights that can be used as legal tools and considered in a legal sphere and are on the same level as all the other indefeasible rights that we have in the Bill of Rights. None of these things can be sacrificed. Even if you have a lot of other elements of a Green Amendment, if you don't have one of these things, what you have is not a Green Amendment because it doesn't fulfill all of the things that we need the Green Amendment to fill, and it's not nearly as strong. So all of these pieces of language are incredibly important. Green Amendment checklists. So in addition to all the things we just highlighted, in order to be a Green Amendment, this amendment needs to A, be in the Bill of Rights, We know this, we talked about it before, if it's not in the Bill of Rights, then it's not equivalent to our other basic rights like freedom of speech, right to bear arms, etc. So it's not as strong as a Green Amendment needs to be. It needs to apply to all levels of government. And that's the same, it's related to that trust language. And if it's not ordering all levels of government or effective to all government actors, then it's not a Green Amendment. It needs to be a clear response to degradation, because if it's not a clear response to degradation, if it's vague, then it's less effective at preventing degradation. It needs to be broad and holistic, and it has to have specific environmental values. So as a single sentence, this may seem a little bit contradictory, but basically what it means is that it needs to be broad, because all amendments are broad, and that's what makes them so applicable, but it still needs to have those specific environmental values of clean air, pure water, etc., in order to not be too broad, and in order to be able to be applied to specific situations, which is what makes it effective. And then it needs to recognize environmental rights as inherent, indefeasible, and inalienable rights of individuals. So, for one, this is the same language that we use for our other basic human rights, liberty, freedom of speech, etc. So we need to use the same type of language in order for them to be truly equivalent and to put them on the same level. And that word individual is also really important, because it shows that these rights are not the collective rights of the people. And if every single individual holds these rights independently, all on their own, and to an equal level, that is what ensures equity. Because if you say that the entire state holds this collectively, then you can rob some people of their environmental rights in order to help the environmental rights of other people, and still say you're protecting the environmental rights, when really what you're doing is just perpetuating the issue of sacrifice zones and stealing the rights and quality of lives of some peoples. So some states have very similar amendments that talk about the granting of environmental rights, that maybe it's in the Bill of Rights, maybe it's mentioned specific environmental values, but if it doesn't have all of these qualities, it's not a Green Amendment. So again, what is not a Green Amendment? It's something that doesn't have any of those things, and it's anything that A, says policy of the state. If it says it is the policy of the state to do blah, 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 whatever it says about the environment and environmental rights, that means it's not self-executing. It doesn't stand on its own, and it depends on the legislature passing laws in order for it to be effective at all. And the legislature does not have to necessarily follow policy, because a policy is really just a strong suggestion, so you can't depend on that. And yeah, not self-executing means it's not enforceable. And anything focusing on hunting or fishing or land preservation. So a lot of states talk about some of these things in their Bill of Rights or elsewhere in their constitution. These things, they sound vaguely environmental. They're about access to the environment, preservation of the environment, but they're not designating human rights. And if they're not assigning human rights, then they're not a Green Amendment. They're not what we're looking for. And of course, if it's not in the Bill of Rights, it doesn't put these environmental rights on par with other rights, which again is part of the essence of what we need in a Green Amendment. So here's an example of a state that has something similar, but which is not a Green Amendment. Does anyone have any ideas of why this may not be considered a Green Amendment? You can take a second to read it.
You all can just unmute and go for it.
Yeah, just go for it. There's only 3 of you, so. You can also type in the chat if you want.
There's no place where it says that it's a right to have all of these things. It says that the legislature should provide it, but it doesn't say explicitly like it's the right of the people to have X.
Yeah. It says that the legislature shall, so it's depending on the legislature, and it's not saying people have this all in of themselves. That's big. And then there's another obvious one in the very top.
Oh, it says Article 4, Section 52, so it's not part of the Bill of Rights.
Yes. So the Bill of Rights is Article 1 in every state constitution. This is clearly not in Article 1, so it's not in the Bill of Rights. Like Ava pointed out, it says the legislator shall, so it's not the indefeasible rights of everyone, and it's not self-executing. Legislature shall, it's equivalent to saying this is state policy. And this yellow highlighted bit That's what makes it seem like a Green Amendment, because it's talking about those specific environmental values, protection of air, water, natural resources, and is protecting against degradation. But because it has those other two orange highlighted things, it's not considered a Green Amendment. So some commonly asked questions about the Green Amendment that people have, either they're just confused or they want to weaken it. Some of these are counter arguments. So 1, why do we need a Green Amendment in addition to environmental protection laws already in place? Well, for New Jersey specifically, we know we need a Green Amendment because our environmental protection laws are clearly not enough. However, say you have this amazing state that has the best environmental laws possible. Well, and if they're still within our current legal system, those root problems we talked about still apply. There's gaps in the laws, there's poor implementation of the laws, and also the laws are volatile. And this is a big thing because laws are implemented by the legislature and they can be rolled back by the legislature. We learned this the hard way in the Trump administration. So, not to politicize, but it's a fact that Trump rolled back a lot of environmental protections. Whatever your opinion on that may be, it shows that our laws, no matter how good they are, can be rolled back by a single administration change. So we can't trust them to always stay in place and be enough. That's why we need the Green Amendment, because the Green Amendment, it's not volatile. It's a stable and overarching protection that goes above the laws and can do more than even the best laws can possibly do. Aren't terms like pure water, clean air, etc. too broad and hard to define for a constitutional provision? Well, yes, they are very broad and they're very hard to define, but that's because broad language is characteristic of all constitutional provisions. You want them to be broad so that they can be applicable to many different situations. And in terms of hard to define, it's no less hard to define than other things that we're given the right to in our Constitution. Think the rights to liberty, right to life. It's hard to define liberty. Hard to define what right to life means. Is that don't kill anybody? Is that don't impede on anyone's quality of life? All of these things are generally sometimes hard to define, and that's why we have a court system to interpret them. Will the Green Amendment hurt business? Answer: no. If businesses violate our environmental rights, just like if they violate somebody's property rights, if they violate our freedom of speech rights, they will be penalized for that, and whatever they're doing to violate our rights will be stopped. But it's not going to hurt business just for the sake of hurting business. And for the most part, the market is already seeing that sustainability is equivalent to profit. It's already going in that direction. So this is just aligning our basic legal system with the direction the market is already going. So it's not expected to cause any problems. And in the states where it has been implemented, you haven't seen businesses crash and die on a large scale. Will the Green Amendment halt development? Answer again is no. The Green Amendment encourages sustainable development. It incentivizes the support of economic and business initiatives that are protecting our rights and helping the environment. Like the Pennsylvania Commonwealth Court said, the Green Amendment is, quote, not meant to deprive persons of their use of property to derail beneficial development. All it's meant to do, again, is to protect our basic rights, just like our other rights are protected. And finally, how can the Green Amendment hold legislators responsible for interstate environmental issues? Well, yes, officials can only protect our environmental rights within their jurisdiction, just like how they can only protect all of our rights within their jurisdiction. So, like all environmental issues, this really depends on us working together, and it's why this is a national movement, and the goal is for all states and eventually the nation to have a Green Amendment, because that's when it's going to be the most effective. In the meantime, legislators can still do the most that they possibly can to protect our rights within their powers. But again, this is one of those things that shows you that the Green Amendment, it's not a solution to everything. It's just another great tool. So what does the Green Amendment actually do when you put it in place? Quick summary. When laws allow harm, the Green Amendment overrules them. The Green Amendment is above the law. It's part of the Constitution, and the Green Amendment will provide basis to challenge any laws that are allowing harm or causing any harm. It can provide a higher level of protection. So again, very related to this first bullet, the Constitution is above the law. Laws are less overreaching, they're much easier to appeal, like we said, they're more volatile. So the Green Amendment provides a firmer, broader, and a lot more authoritative protection for our environmental rights. It makes environmental rights equivalent to property, equivalent to liberty, equivalent to whatever basic American value and constitutional right that you want to fill in the blank with. Back to the idea of making our environmental rights equivalent to other rights in the Bill of Rights. These things, they're intrinsic to our values. They have huge power in American culture, in American politics. Right now, the environment often loses out to these things. It loses out to things like private property, to things like economic and business concerns. Right now, we can't stand on equal footing when we're having these debates and trying to protect the environment. So the Green Amendment allows us to start winning the environmental battle when it comes to these things, or at least give us an equal fighting chance. Forces the government to look at prevention first. So remember that big root problem that Margaret mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, that the government is focusing on the management of pollution before the prevention, accepting pollution as a fact of life. This solves that problem because legislators must now change their point of view when they're making laws, and they must not consider pollution as a fact of life and focus on preventing it from ever occurring. So it perpetuates the idea that no harm is ever okay and changes how these laws are written. And again, most importantly, it's a legal tool. It's a tool, so it must be used. Remember Pennsylvania's kind of useless Green Amendment that just lay there for decades when no one was using it. It's a part of a toolkit, and if we have it, then it can be one tool among many that we use to help protect the environment and protect our basic rights to a healthy environment and to living. So to look at a good example of how the Green Amendment has been used in real life, this is from Montana, the case of the Montana Environmental Information Center. Yes, that's correct. And Montana's Department of Environmental Quality. It's a case from real history of how Montana's Green Amendment has been used in real life. In 1992, the mining company 7-Up Pete Joint Venture got mining exploration license from the DEQ for its gold mining operations. Then, in 1995, it submitted a new work plan that wanted to update its permit to include massive open pit mining operations that included approval for pumping underground water at the site. The problem with this, sorry about the dings, the problem with this is that where they were mining was in the upper Blackfoot River Valley, and they were at the junction of two important rivers in the area, the Blackfoot River and the Landers Fork River. So there was pushback to this because a lot of environmental groups were very worried about the effect this would have on groundwater. The pushback was led by the Montana Environmental Info Center, as well as some other environmental activist groups, and they sought suspension of the mining company's license. So they were attacking it on two grounds, both related to the Green Amendment. So first, they attacked the DEQ, saying that by amending the mining company's license to allow for this plan, they were letting these two rivers, get contaminated with arsenic, which is a carcinogen, as well as zinc. And obviously, Montana has a Green Amendment, and the Green Amendment doesn't allow for any degradation. So they were violating the Constitution in doing so. Then they also attacked the Water Quality Act that the DEQ used to justify their actions, the 1995 Montana Water Quality Act. What this did is it allowed a waiver of non-degradation review in certain cases, including this case with the mining company. That's how the DEQ was justifying its actions. They said that this act, this part of the act at least, was also a violation of the Green Amendment in the Constitution because, again, no degradation is allowed. So you have to make sure beforehand, and the state has to act with prudence and do its research and check to make sure that no degradation is going to occur. They went to the district court, and the district court dismissed it. They said that no significant changes in the water quality that would hurt human health had been shown, and they said that the water quality standards had not been shown to be breached. So basically, they said that the plaintiffs had not proven the harms, and so no constitutional rights had technically been violated. They didn't like this, so they appealed, and they went to the Supreme Court in 1999, and the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the plaintiffs, reversing the district court decision. They said that the Green Amendment is both anticipatory and prevented. So they're not limited. It's not limited to degradation that's conclusively linked to human health risks or to a violation of state law. Because remember, the Green Amendment is above the law. It was enough that the mining company had added arsenic and zinc to the waters at a level that had not previously existed. So no matter whether or not, regardless of the water quality standards, regardless of the effects it had on people, if it was more than had existed before, that was enough to show degradation and enough to violate the Constitution. So they concluded that both the DEQ's decision to amend the license and allow for this activity, as well as the part of the Water Quality Act that waived the non-degradation review, were unconstitutional. So in the end, the license for the mining company could not be upheld, and they were not allowed to continue. This case made clear that environmental rights applied to all parts of government. They applied to agencies, and agencies are very important because they're the ones permitting. They're the ones allowing these polluters and these different companies that have a huge effect on the environment to go ahead. They're the ones giving the all clear. So it didn't apply just to state laws or to the legislators making the laws. It also applied to these government employees. It also made clear the strength of these environmental rights and how they superseded state regulations. They did not depend on people starting to die. They did not depend on the state laws already in place. They were independent of the laws, and they had nothing to do with that. So this was a very powerful case showing the Green Amendment's strength in Montana.
Okay, great. So now we know what the Green Amendment is. We have some context. We're going to go back to those problems now that we kind of discussed at the beginning and kind of show how the Green Amendment can apply if enacted here in our state. Okay, so we started in Newark, the Newark lead crisis. So how could it help? Let's see. So let's review. The problem, first of all, was the unsanitary water and the slow government response. Remember, 6 years, little to no action, or not, it wasn't even over yet in 6 years. So anyone can unmute and go for it. What Green Amendment provisions are violated here in Newark? Think back to when Svan was talking about the different parts, the different phrases, and how that impacted in its application.
The provision that says that you have the right to clean water and the provision that says that inaction is just as bad as action, and that the government has to act if there's a violation. You
got that, yep. Those are the two main parts that are kind of addressed here. So yeah, the right to clean water. Yeah, also you see at the bottom the inaction or action, and also the government must protect the environmental rights of all people equally. So obviously not all places have a lead crisis. This is kind of showing an inequality of the environmental rights of the people of New Jersey. So the Green Amendment provides a strong constitutional right for the rights being violated here in this specific case. And like Ava pointed out, that action or inaction clause penalizes the government's slow response. So this actually really help this the community of Newark get over this lead crisis. Okay, so our third example was the Coventana incinerator in the Ironbound community in Newark. So this environmental justice community was facing air pollution, and this was all okay because it was justified for the benefits to elsewhere, to whiter, more affluent communities. So for the third time, what Green Amendment provisions are violated here? Air pollution, justified for the benefits to elsewhere.
One place is making a sacrifice for the better of other communities, so it's not putting everyone on an equal playing field.
Great. I'm not sure, I couldn't see who said that, but you're right on the money with that. You have the right to clean air, and like you said, with the trust language, the government must protect the environmental rights, these basic rights we need to survive, of all people equally. And by justifying this degradation for someone else, this obviously is not following this trust language. It is not treating everyone equally in terms of the environment. So the Coventana does become a violator of these fundamental rights, and sacrifice zones are now unconstitutional. So the Ironbound, this environmental justice community, cannot be sacrificed. And while, like Swan was talking about, the Green Amendment is not a Panica solution, it needs to be worked around, it needs to be worked with other solutions. It's one tool in a legal toolbox, one tool that will help environmental justice communities achieve environmental equity. Okay, so now let's recap what we went over this past hour. So today, we went over the context, why we're fighting for a Green Amendment. We need to know about it if we want to teach others and get this enacted. We went over the problems, those 3 examples, and there are many more. And it really showed that our current legal system does not protect our human rights to a livable environment, and that needs to be changed. We talked about what the Green Amendment is. It's a constitutional amendment and assertion of our environmental rights. It's fine using the big words in the slides. What does the Green Amendment do? We went over that. How it actually wins battles. It is a really effective tool for the people to use to protect their health and their environment. And it shows what this means for us. Tying back those problems in New Jersey, if New Jersey passes this in both the Senate and the Assembly, and then on the ballot in November, we will have the means, our environmental justice communities and all communities will have the means to justly tackle many local environmental issues. So now, thank you all for coming. We have Maya here, founder of Green Amendments for Generations, and if you guys have any questions for her, you can unmute or raise your virtual hand. Saya.
I was wondering where you got the most pushback when you were trying to get this passed in Pennsylvania. Like, who fought back against passing the Green Amendment the most and why?
So first off, fabulous job. Great job, really spot on. And I hope you all learned a lot and were really inspired because that was really fantastic. In the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, that Green Amendment was passed in 1971. So I wasn't really involved in it. What I can tell you is there was a single legislator who really conceived of the idea and championed it. And I think it was really significantly embraced at the time because the environmental movement was really at its pinnacle. And so that's why you had unanimous support in both houses of the legislature and that 4-1 vote that was referred to. What we are finding now in the 11 states where we're advancing green amendments, the pushback that we're getting is largely from industry and lobbyists and developers. They are largely doing it behind the scenes because rightfully so, they're embarrassed to come out front and speak it out loud because it is ridiculous, although some will do that. But their challenges are all pretty light and we can address them very easily. You heard some of the in the frequently asked questions, you sort of heard some of the challenges that we're hearing about, and you heard the answers that we give about the broad language, that it's going to crash the economy, things like that. And those are all very answerable questions and not really legitimate concerns. So you guys did such a fantastic job. No need for anything more.
Well, if no one has questions, we do have a Kahoot to recap. Not required because I know we have gone over time, but if anybody wants to stick on for the Kahoot, I will share my screen and do that. So any questions, get it out of the way now so we don't have to come back to it. Last call for questions.
I have one question. What are some ways or techniques that you recommend for helping communities get more educated, especially online?
So I'm actually wondering if Svan and Margaret and the organizer, if you have answers to that first that you would like to share.
Well, we definitely need to educate communities more because this will have to go on the ballot. And if it's going to be on the ballot, we need people to know about it since it's their choice. Um, One thing that does help to raise awareness among communities is actually passing town resolutions, in that you are going to your town council, you're making a presentation in front of them. So everyone in the town council and everyone who's attending the town council meetings, or if it's environmental commission, all of your community members who go to those. I don't know how crowded they are these days. But that is a form of educating your community because it does raise awareness through that. And that is great in addition to pressuring legislators when you pass those resolutions. Obviously, stuff like this. And then I know NJSSC has like I don't know, Margaret, is an Earth Week or Earth Month thing right now in April. But
either an Earth Week or an Earth Month. We have something going on for Earth Day.
Yeah, so we have, I know Ava, who's the artistic activism coordinator at NJSSC, and our MSM and art coordinator for our campaign. She's planning an art show to help raise awareness about the Green Amendment and also as something to send to legislators. That's a great way, sharing that. And then that's a part of kind of the Earth Week, Earth Month, whichever it is right now. And then we're also going to be planning separate events. We haven't decided yet, probably something along the lines of workshops or webinars. Maybe, Maya, we were thinking of doing film screenings of the Green Amendment, like short movies that they have, something like that. So sharing that is great to help educate the community. But then it's also, a lot of it falls on kind of local groups. So environmental clubs or whatever local environmental groups are working with in there, because they have the strongest connection to the communities and they can spread the word the easiest and they know the best way to reach them.
A great
sorry. I have another question just for, I guess, Margaret and Svan. I think, Svan, I asked you this when we were talking over email, but are there any restrictions when it comes to how we go about spreading the word within our communities?
Restrictions, do you mean as in within schools, or what do you mean exactly?
Like, is there anything that you would say is kind of off limits or you wouldn't recommend when it comes to like educating our community? Like Caitlin and I specifically, we do mutual aid within North Jersey, Hudson County. We have a lot of connections to other mutual aid groups, sustainability groups, as well as like POC-led groups that are focusing on state legislation that helps advance low-income POC communities. So when it comes to connecting with these groups as well as talking to people within our communities, are there any restrictions, like anything that is considered off limits, or is it like very?
I mean, I think most environmental things are intersectional. I would think that this would be a great thing that you could share with them, and we need all the help we can get. Of course, if you're focusing on uplifting low-income communities, the environmental amendment, the Green Amendment focuses a lot of it on environmental justice, securing environmental rights equally for all people. So I could definitely see the connection there. Sorry. And maybe Maya has some more experience with this, or Svan has some ideas on that as well.
Yeah, in terms of restrictions, I can't really think of much. We're trying to keep our campaign as open as possible to get different people working in different ways, because you do want to have different tactics going to have the best level of success, I would try to avoid politicizing it. So one thing is, a lot of people confuse it with the Green New Deal. And the Green New Deal, it scares a lot of people. So you don't want to associate it with anything that is associated with partisanship or like the far left or something. Green Amendment by itself, it's pretty moderate. So it's not a problem as long as there's no like confusion in the communications there. I don't know if Margaret or Maya has anything else to add.
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect. I just did want to highlight that the website njgreenamendment.org will have a lot of information and a lot of opportunities for engagement, and that's also where the films are. So if you wanted to do like a living room screening, but it's great to hear that you're talking about doing screenings. And the only other thing is, just if you are working with a community who's in need of food or has some other priority that they're working on, and I'm sure you will be, I'm sure you're already thinking of this, but it's just really important that we be sensitive and not co-opt somebody else's time, space, and resources for ours. So just think about if it's the right time, place, and space to introduce it. And if so, doing it in a way that really makes sure that you're connecting with their needs and their goals, and they don't feel like you're co-opting their efforts.
Great. Just one more thing. So remember you asking about how you can, what's the best way you can help take action online. And so basically we're connecting this a lot back to local groups. So one of the best ways you can get involved, and I know Saya has done some of this, is to really go to your local environmental club or group, if it's the right space, obviously, to kind of do a little Green Amendment pitch and say, would you guys be interested in getting involved? And that's a really good way to spread awareness, spread advocacy, and possibly even spread the movement. So I know Saya has been doing some presentations, and a lot of us have for our local environmental clubs. So if that's something you're interested in, we could definitely give you the slides. We have like them all set up and some speaking notes as well.
Any more questions?
I do have one quick question. So I'm just there's a situation that I've noticed in my own community that I'm wondering if the Green Amendment would be able to protect. So I know that certain communities, whether it's because of money or space or anything like that, aren't able to recycle all recyclable plastics. So some of them end up getting thrown in the trash and where they shouldn't be. So is that something that the Green Amendment will be able to help out, giving everybody the chance to actually properly recycle everything?
So that's probably going to be a tough one in terms of really enforcing it all the way through the courts, which is ultimately what you may need. You can certainly use the Green Amendment in your advocacy to talk about the obligation of government officials to protect natural resources and protect environmental rights, and talk about all of the harms that are associated with plastics, not just their ultimate disposal, but the way they're created, which is through, fracked fossil fuels. But I think that you beyond really trying to use it in how you engage and speak with government officials at that local level, you may be hard pressed. There may be a much larger scale, something that we could conceive of at some point. But I think that's why the point that was made earlier during the presentation, that this isn't going to be an instant panacea for everything, but it really is a powerful opportunity for a lot of things. So think about it in how, again, using it in your advocacy and how you engage with government officials, if we get it passed in New Jersey, which is the first thing we have to do. But we may have to think really hard to think that it could be used in an enforceable way actually in that context. Best thing is to get people to stop using plastics. Right?
Great. Any more questions before we, I know it's 15 minutes over. Anyone else have any more questions?
Okay, well, like Margaret said, we are 15 minutes over, so we do have a Kahoot. If you want to stay on for that, you are certainly welcome to. If not, thank you so much for coming.